Hello and welcome back. Still on the Linux directory tree. I find it difficult to pronounce that sometimes, but we are going to be looking at the libraries folder, which is lib, lost and found, media, mnt, which is mount, opt, and proc, possibly the root folder as well. So let's get right into it. Now, library. Now, what do we mean by library or lib? Because before I actually take you the journey into the lib folder, I need you to understand first what libraries are. Libraries are just a collection of resources used by the computer. When a developer is writing a code for a certain functionality, what they essentially do is they create what we call functions. Now, these functions can be grouped together to become a library. These libraries are used by the system. The operating system kernel uses library when it's running programs or even custom applications. They use library. In previous Linux versions or Ubuntu versions, there used to be a separation between the libraries used by the user in the system and the libraries used by the system. But it looks like everything is beginning to be merged together right now. As you can see, lib is now linked to USR lib, and USR, mostly regarded as user, it's just a place where you keep libraries for users. Okay, but as we can see here, it's been linked together, and these four are essentially the same depending on the operating system bit. So you must have heard of 32 bits or 64 bit. That's essentially what's going on here. So it's just the directory used to store libraries, and depending on the bit, you can have it stored for 32 or 64 bit. Now, let's have a quick look at within the lib folder to see what sort of libraries are there. And by the way, libraries are also considered as modules, because the kernel uses modules in the form of libraries to do what it needs to do, and we're going to see that as an extension called .so. And let's have a quick look, and let's go by two levels. So if you look at, you can see we have .so, the extension so right there. So those are the modules used by the kernel. Now let's have a look at other libraries. If we look into the Python folder, in the Python directory within the lib folder, we can see that there are some files with an extension py. Now, Python is a programming language which most DevOps engineers actually use for a lot of system engineering stuff. There's a library used by AWS Boto, which was actually developed with Python. Now, these are libraries for Python, and when you're programming, you import libraries to do specific things. It's just a combination of different functions that can do specific things. Let's have a quick look at this chunk.py. And this is a Python. This is a Python library, and as you can see, there's this def is just a definition of a function, and you know a function when you see its name with open and close bracket. So I've just decided to open up this file for you just to see that it's just a library that contains functions that is meant to do things. Moving on to the next is lost and found. Now, lost+found is actually found in every mount directory. So this lost+found is related to this root directory. If you mount another mount point on a partition, it would have its own lost+found. Now, lost+found is actually used for things like system recovery. Let's say, for example, you're using your system and for whatever reason the system shuts down abruptly, maybe for power failure or whatever. Now, files can get damaged or corrupt. Every time the system boots up again, there are some file system checks that happen that essentially tries to recover corrupt files. Now these files that gets recovered, they're probably not complete because it's broken, and for that reason it's not going to be associated with any particular directory. So the best place to put them is the lost+found, where you can then go in and see if you can recover anything, if there's anything that's still useful. So it's just essentially for recovery purposes. And moving on to the next one, media. We talked about media and MNT previously, where we were talking about CD-ROM. Is similar, they're for similar use case. If you add any media, it's called media. So a media could be a CD, a USB disk, or it's just a mount point to access things like that. And also for MNT is also basically for mounting those type of resources. Now OPT is usually regarded as optional or option, and what it means is if there are custom applications that are not specific to the system. Let's say you wrote your own application and you want to install it on this Linux operating system, you would essentially want to put it into the OPT directory. Because for example, I wouldn't expect anyone to create their own software and then go ahead and stick them into USL lib, for example. There has to be a place for any add-on packages or software that is not tied to the system, and that's what the OPT is meant for. Now proc is also called process. Every time the operating system starts up, there are processes that get created, and a process is just an instance of an application. If you run a program, let's say let me actually demonstrate this for you to see what I'm talking about. There's a program called Vim, and I'm going to try to run a program in the background so that you can see how a process will be generated for that program. And if I say instance of a program, what I mean is to say that an existence of that program. So that means there can be multiple existence of the same program. So an instance is just an existence of one program. Let's actually demonstrate this. So I'm going to run a program called Vim, and I'll send that to the background. I can do that with a $sign. Now don't you worry too much about running Vim or sending it to the background, because I have a separate video dedicated to processes, and I'll explain to you what background means and foreground and things like that. Okay, so we have a program running in the background, and it has an ID number of 19957. To show you that there is an instance of this program running, I would look for that 19957 within the proc directory. So what I would do is I'll do an ls -l on the proc directory, and I will run the command called grep, and grep is used to filter and find something. So what I'm looking for is 19957. As you can see, within the proc folder there is an instance of Vim running, which is 19957. If we do an ls on proc, you can see there are so many processes running. So each of these folders are processes running on the system. Now this one is the very first process that is running on the system, and it's usually run by the root user, and we will talk about that more when we start talking about the whole boot loading process. But essentially, to get you to understand what is going on here, the proc folder is used to store information about specific instances of programs running in the system. And finally, let me talk about the last folder, which is the root. Okay, so tree. Okay, so the last folder in this video is the root. Now the root is just another home folder, just like what we talked about the other time. We talked about home/dare. Now the home folder for root user is /root, and if we do an ls on /root, you can see I don't have permission. It says permission denied because the user currently running right now is dare, and the /root is the home folder for the root user. The root user is the super user in the system. Now to be able to get into that folder, I'd need to use a command called sudo, and I would need to put my password, and it doesn't have anything. Let's do the ls with more information. As you can see, it just has some dot files in there, no folder, nothing, and it's just the home directory for root. That's all it is. Okay, and that's it. Thank you very much. I hope this has been informative for you, and I will see you in the next video.